town halls. The coronavirus has us kind of stuck in the house, but that doesn't mean you still can't hear from our gubernatorial candidates. So thank you for tuning in and joining in. I'm your host for the evening, Indiana's own Dana Black. I'm the Deputy Chair for Engagement for our state Democrat Party, and I could not be happier and more proud to be hosting this event with our next governor of the great state of Indiana, Dr. Woody Myers. For anyone who wants to ask a question, feel free to type it. We have a team of folks here right now that will field your question. Unfortunately, not everyone's question may not get answered, but we will do the best we can to accommodate as many folk as we possibly can. So that we don't run long, let's just go ahead and get this bad boy started, because I know you really want to hear from the person who wants to represent our entire state of Indiana as the next governor, Dr. Woody Myers. Sir, welcome. Well, thank you for allowing me to host your town hall. I know the constituents out there are excited all over the state to hear from you. Before we get started, why don't you do an introduction for those that haven't actually met you yet and had the privilege that I've had of getting to know you and hearing your plan. Just go ahead and give a little introduction about who you are and where you come from.
Well, first of all, Dana, thank you again for hosting. It's wonderful to be back in your home as we do this in this setting. And yes, we are in a new normal now with the coronavirus pandemic. We are spending a lot more time in our homes, and we're reflecting on all the situation that we're now in, and all of the problems that this is both causing and exposing in our nation and in our state and in our society. For those who haven't met me, I'm a physician. I'm a third-generation Hoosier, born and raised here in Indianapolis. I graduated from Shortridge High School. IPS, trained in internal medicine, critical care medicine, and who knew then that would come in to be, for me, so important today, not just in my decision to run for governor, but in the crisis that we're now in here in Indiana. I am former Commissioner of Health for the state of Indiana under Governor Bob Orr, and then also under Governor Evan Bayh, and I'm a former health commissioner in the city of New York under Mayor Dave Dinkins. So I've spent a lot of time, Dana, both in the public sector and in the private sector, involved in virtually every aspect of clinical medicine, of administrative medicine, of healthcare management over the last 25 or 30 years.
Okay. And so, the coronavirus or COVID-19, depending on where folks are in the news, it appears a little scary for a lot of people. Or on the other end, some people are not taking it serious enough. Can you break it down
Sure.
for regular folk what this virus is, how serious it is, and how, talk about some of the symptoms and things like that?
Well, first of all, coronavirus is a family name for a number of different viruses. The way we should think about this is a particularly bad actor in this particular family of viruses. It's a new member of the family. It was thought to have appeared in the late fall in China. We don't know that for 100% sure, but we believe that's the case. And what makes this different is the rapidity of the spread.
What do you mean by rapidity?
The virus has spread very quickly from the origins in China throughout the world. And part of that is because of the global transportation system that we now have, people getting on planes, getting on ships, and moving across the globe unlike ever before. But part of it is that this virus, the characteristics of this virus are different.
Okay.
It seems to move from person to person in a much more efficient way than other viruses, for instance, even the influenza virus. And that's why we've got so many worried public health officials, epidemiologists, physicians, and others throughout the world. That's why we've paid so much attention to it as a global pandemic now. That's why you've got all of the federal health agencies and most, if not all, the state health agencies working 24/7 on this, because we know that this is different and the potential for harm is tremendous.
And so you are a candidate for governor. And I'm not, we do things out of love because we're Democrats and that's how we do things. But, the response, I believe, and some people will say from our particular leadership right now has been slightly inadequate. Can you talk about what you would have done differently had you been at the helm of Indiana to deal with this crisis?
Well, I think slightly inadequate is unfortunately an understatement here. We are way behind. Our governor has not demonstrated the kind of leadership that I would have hoped he would have demonstrated that we really need here in Indiana. We knew weeks and weeks ago that this was coming. We could have acted weeks and weeks ago. We did not act. We are now playing catch up as a result. I offered my thoughts several weeks ago in that we needed to get ready for this by creating a leadership group to guide our state, both within the state of Indiana's borders, but in coordinating with other states and coordinating with the federal government and entities and agencies outside of the United States.
That's very similar to what they're doing in New York and Connecticut and New Jersey.
Well, they have taken that approach in other states. I wish we would have done that.
That would have been nice.
That would have been a much better way to go, and we wouldn't be as far behind as I believe we now are. We also would have understood the state's needs with respect to improving the healthcare infrastructure, especially as relates to testing. Testing is very, very important with this particular virus and this pandemic. Unless we know who has it, we can't take direct action to prevent the spread as we would like to be able to do. And therefore, getting rid of any and all barriers with respect to testing, financial barriers, logistic barriers, barriers in getting the equipment, the supplies, and training the people to do the test and getting them moved through the system, that could have been done, I think, more efficiently and faster, not just at the state level, but at the national level as well. I believe that that has caused us now to be behind in our ability to respond efficiently. And unfortunately, according to our Surgeon General, we're about 3 to 4 weeks behind where Italy is today. And if you follow the news about what's going on in Italy, it's not pretty at all.
No, it's not. And unfortunately, in Indiana, as of today, we have recorded 2 deaths because of this virus. So this thing is having a real life impact on people. And I was trying to be nice and respectful to the governor, but if you're saying slightly inadequate is not enough, then we're not doing enough. You have taught the nation about how to deal with HIV and AIDS. You are, pretty much an expert on how to deal and communicate with the public about things that they are afraid of. Communicate tonight to all of our listeners how we can prevent the spread of this thing, what we need to do to be responsible adults, and to make sure that we try to, as they say, flatten the curve on this.
Information, unfortunately, today is our only really good weapon. And the information tells us that isolation from individuals who are known to have the coronavirus is probably the best step that we can take right now, because we don't have an effective treatment and we do not yet have a vaccine. Although scientists are working very, very hard to get us treatments and to get us a vaccine, we're still many, many months away from that being a reality. So now the goal will be to identify as many people as we can, as quickly as we can, and take the appropriate steps, both after identification and then as individuals who are presumably not infected, to take those steps that are required to minimize the likelihood of transmission. And that's why we've seen the measures that have been recommended and in some cases enforced now throughout the nation and in many places around the world. Social isolation is a tool that is now being used in order for us to minimize the likelihood of spread through droplets in the air, through touching of surfaces. Those are the 2 primary ways today that we know that it can be spread. And therefore, by removing ourselves from others in a way that allows that spread to be minimized, we are doing the best we can until other measures become available.
Now, we know some of us, unfortunately, can't isolate. We have to go to work. We have to, we just can't isolate.
Right.
Can talk about what the symptoms look like if you're out here and then if you start to feel a certain way,
Sure.
to begin isolating yourself.
Well, first of all, what we know today is that not everyone who is infected with the coronavirus will show symptoms. We know that there can be many folks who carry the virus from one person to another or to many without having the fever, the cough, the shortness of breath that we typically characterize with respect to the COVID-19 syndrome, which is the illness that is caused by this particular novel new coronavirus. We know that this virus affects different populations differently. Individuals who are over the age of 60 are disproportionately affected. Individuals who have problems within their immune system because of disease processes like cancer or cancer treatment, diabetes and heart disease, they are disproportionately affected. One piece of what we think is good news, Dana, is that children don't seem to be as clinically affected in most cases as adults. And I'm glad, of course, because I don't want to see any child succumb to this. Although if a child has a problem with his or her immune system, they are more likely.
Yeah.
It doesn't seem that they are primary victims of the COVID-19 disease. However, we don't know for sure. We are still learning to what degree children can transmit it from one person to another. That's why one of the recommendations I've made is that we've got to shut down the schools until we know more. Any group of children where one might have the virus and spreads it to another child, even though they don't get sick from it, they could be vectors or carriers to other people. So again, there's a lot that we have learned in a very short period of time. There are some similarities to HIV and AIDS in that the number one problem when you have a pandemic like this is fear. Just as there was the fear of the unknown in the 80s when we were just learning about HIV, I could see and feel and sense that fear in some people today. And so the danger is overreacting and underreacting. We've got to make sure that we're on the right trail to doing all that is appropriate as quickly and as efficiently as possible.
So why do you think you can't get into the mind of somebody else, and if you can, then let's just go ahead and manipulate those minds and let them all vote for you. But you can't get into the mind of our current governor. But why do you think his administration has been so reluctant to move swiftly on this thing? What is the holdup?
Well, in order to react effectively, you have to have a team in place that's empowered to take the appropriate action, and that requires leadership. I think that's the best way to put it. We could have brought people together quicker. We could have acted sooner. We could have taken steps while the legislature was in session. Now they're out of session, and there are things that I would hope that the legislature should do that need to be done. Perhaps a new special session might need to be called or implemented or required. Hopefully we can do that virtually so that we don't get all of the legislators in a room at the same time within 6 feet of each other so they can spread it.
Doctor, if little old me can have the technology, I'm certain.
Well, there's some very smart people in Indiana that can figure out how to make that happen. But those are the kinds of things that I just wish we had acted upon sooner than we have. Now, I am very worried, Dana, about a number of things, one of which are settings in which we don't have a lot of options with respect to confinement. Settings such as nursing homes. We saw what happened on the cruise ships when people were unable to remove themselves from that environment. And we saw what happened in the state of Washington where the nursing home became the nidus of the disease and it spread from there. What happens when you are in a confined setting and people are around each other for long periods of time? The virus just spreads. And it goes from one person to the next. It goes to the workers that are in, and they take it home to
their families.
Their families potentially. The good news again is that not everybody will get sick in the sense that they will need to be hospitalized. The bad news is they can still transmit it. But having those confined settings like nursing homes, and I'm very worried about jails and prisons. If this virus gets into one of our prisons, we don't have a lot of options to move those individuals safely from one setting to another. There's not a lot of excess capacity. Indiana is now utilizing many of the county jails to hold prisoners. So we've got to think of different solutions. Who can be released safely early in order to make space? What will happen when we get infected? Not yet, but when we get infected individuals in the prison system, how will they be moved? Where will they be moved? Who will take care of them? Those are the logistic steps that needed to be thought through weeks ago, and that hopefully now there are teams in place working their way through, because when it happens, it's going to happen relatively quickly.
So it's kind of safe to say that your confidence level with the current administration isn't really there. I mean, you're a medical professional. This is what you do. And, it doesn't appear that your confidence is there.
It's not exactly that, Dean. There are some really good people working in the state of Indiana's Department of Health and in other agencies who are working their tails off right now to try to make sure that they're doing all that should be done, that could be done. And I just applaud them for that effort. It's just that it needs to be better coordinated. It needs to be focused on the problems that we know will occur sooner rather than later. And we need to prepare for the inevitable. It is inevitable, in my opinion, that the hospital beds that we have in the state today will be utilized far higher than they are now in the next few weeks, and therefore we're going to run out of space.
Yeah.
Especially with rooms that need negative pressure, so that the air in the room stays in the room and doesn't go to the outside. Those are specialized hospital rooms. They call them negative pressure rooms. So one of the things I've called for is an inventory of all negative pressure rooms in the state of Indiana for physicians to be able to access, so that if you have a patient that you need to refer to that kind of a setting, we know where there might be space available, which the closest available room for that patient to be hospitalized. We also know that the equipment requirements are very important to be met early. We need reserve equipment for respirators, for ventilators, for all of the tools that can and need to be used in order to manage this group of patients. Hospitals should be stocking up on that, and then on the medications that are useful in those settings. That should be an activity that all of our healthcare facilities are working on right now to gear up for what could be a difficult challenge if the system gets overwhelmed. And that's what our federal officials are worried about as well. Overwhelming of an already stressed healthcare system. Hospitals today don't sit around with a lot of empty beds waiting for someone to come in. They run a very tight ship, literally and figuratively. And so we've got to find where that capacity is going to be, and what we're going to do when that capacity needs to increase. And it could be very rapidly.
And we're going to kind of switch gears, but we're going to, this particular virus, this particular pandemic has brought to light a lot of other issues that a lot of us on this side of the aisle have been talking about for a long time. One of those things is healthcare and accessibility to affordable healthcare. And there are counties in Indiana right now that don't have a hospital.
Right.
They don't have a medical facility. And at the same time, you have the current Attorney General who is fighting in federal court to, disband ACA, the Affordable Care Act. As governor of Indiana, what would you direct the Attorney General to do in reference to affordable health care and allowing Hoosiers to access it?
Well, we don't have long enough, I don't think, on your podcast today to really go into all of those
this is your
details.
show, baby.
but rest assured that we wouldn't be doing what we're doing now. We would be working to help Hoosiers, not to cause trouble with an act that has already proven to be successful. The Republican administration in Washington, the Congress, has tried to defeat the Affordable Care Act now 75, 80 different times. They don't really want to defeat it because they know that so many people like it so much. So they go through the motions, in my opinion, of appearing to defeat it. And we have the ACA in Indiana. We don't call it Obamacare. We call it something else.
HIP 2.0.
But it's here and it's helping. We should make it more available. We should make it easier to access. But we know that has aided a lot of Hoosiers and will aid a lot of Hoosiers who need the care. And think about it for a moment. What if that wasn't here prior to that? It's not going to help everyone, but it'll help a number of people that wouldn't have ordinarily had the access to the healthcare system that they need. We've got to make it, though, especially easy to get into the system with respect to this particular pandemic. That's why I've also called for our state to be ready to acquire temporarily facilities such as motels or hotels in order to take care of the people that can't self-isolate.
Yeah.
If someone is in the homeless population and is living either on the street or under a bridge or under an overpass, and they become infected with the virus, and we do not take them out of that setting, what happens? What happens is that everyone else in that setting is exposed as well. Or if they go to the shelter or to the homeless facility, they can spread it there as well. That's why when they are identified and they can't self-isolate, we, the state of Indiana, need to take responsibility for doing the right thing and putting them in a situation that's both humane and can provide for their needs, both physical, mental health, and other, such that they can enjoy the therapy that's available and not infect other Hoosiers.
Absolutely. I know that Governor Cuomo has talked about why aren't we using our military to help build military hospitals in spaces. Right now, we've got people down at the border trying to fix a wall, but we also have humans and kids in cages, right? We got kids in cages on the border, military playing with walls. Why shouldn't we, or would you be okay with the Indiana National Guard working to create temporary hospitals and military hospitals and things like that?
Absolutely. I called for the Guard to be activated a couple days ago. I believe the governor might have done that this evening. I don't know what their assignment is going to be, but rest assured that that's what they're there for. You know, Dana, that's what government is there for. It's to take care of the people when the people need to be taken care of. This is a public health emergency. This is when government is absolutely required to do its job, to be at its best. And that is why I believe these steps should be taken right away. We have got to do all we can to minimize the morbidity and the mortality associated with this unprecedented virus. You know, the coronavirus is exposing weaknesses throughout our society. It's exposing weaknesses in our education system, exposing weaknesses in our healthcare system. We've asked for schools to be temporarily dismissed, and we've told our teachers and our administrators, let's go to online learning. Well, not every school can do that. Certain school districts, of course, have that set up and are ready to go. But if our legislature, instead of not funding teachers and not funding the school systems, had done so, all of them would have the equipment, all of them would have the technology, such that they could engage in online learning in the way that we now have asked them to do. So that failure to really invest in our school system, invest in our teachers, invest in our kids is now being exposed.
Absolutely.
So it's healthcare, it's education.
It's everything. And the other thing about this is also infrastructure. I know when people talk about infrastructure, they look at it from a, roads and bridges type of situation. You talk about even online schools. There are communities that are only dealing, when it comes to internet, with 3G. They don't even have high-speed internet. This current administration has been, and the previous one to it, has been talking about expanding high-speed internet to some of our rural communities and communities, but it has not taken place. Talk about how you would make that a priority as well, because again, it's showing weaknesses. Our infrastructure is a weakness.
We have to make sure that we take full advantage of the fact that Indiana is one of the targets for expansion of 5G, the new form of internet broadband expansion. We know that the companies like Verizon and AT&T and Google Fiber and others have seen some of the advantages of setting up shop here, of expanding here. we have to push the accelerator all the way to the floor and get that moving, because it's not just certain urban areas that need it, it's needed throughout the state in all of our rural areas as well. And 5G and the related technologies, the hardware and the software associated with it, have been found to be extremely useful in agriculture and management of the farm and management of crops, in terms of the watering and the fertilization and so on. All of those things are advantaged when we have that infrastructure fully in place. And we just need to push the accelerator on it a little further down and make it happen faster. And that's what I would do if I were elected to this job. That would be one of our priorities. But the healthcare system, the education system, all of our infrastructure, this is the time to invest. Why have a $2 billion plus surplus why have a rainy day fund if when it's raining, i.e. when there's a public health emergency, you're not using it?
Well, not just the surplus, they also have a reserve.
The surplus, the reserve, all of that should be employed right now in order to take care of the needs that we are finding as a result of this pandemic.
You know what, though, Dr. Myers, I read there was an article that was printed out in the Indianapolis Star this week, and it was more like an expose than an article. And the Indiana Department of Environmental Management granted a permit to an organization who wants to build a coal to diesel plant in Spencer, Indiana. And according to our own state guidelines, they're not necessarily hard, fast rules. The level of carcinogens that any plant would be allowable is essentially 1 cancer patient per million. This particular plant that the state has granted a permit to is 13 times higher than that. You just mentioned that we should be doing things that should be helping our citizens, but here's a case of as a government, we are doing things that we know are going to harm people. Talk to us about, the importance of renewable energies and building a plant that's 13 times higher in the carcinogen emittance is not a positive move.
It's Dana, it's completely contrary to common sense.
Well, there you go.
That's what it is. It makes no sense whatsoever. This is the time to invest in renewable energy. This is the time to double down on solar, the time to double down on wind. I remember the day when we were told that Indiana couldn't do solar. We were too high up in the latitude, and Indiana couldn't do wind. We didn't have enough. Both of those were exposed as lies, and the technologies that are available today are making it even more accessible. The day for investment in coal has really passed.
Yes, it is.
And we are now moving away from a fossil fuel era. Even the utility companies have realized that, which is why they are trying as aggressively as some of them, as they can, to move into renewables, because I think they know that's the future. Coal is being replaced primarily today with natural gas because of natural gas's decreased cost compared to what it was in the past. And although it's still a fossil fuel, it's a step better than polluting the air that coal does. And we know that Indiana is one of the worst states, if not the worst state in the nation with respect to air pollution.
48th in the nation, sir.
So I just know we could do a much better job of thinking through the health of our citizens. And if the voters give me this job, and I see myself now, Dana, on a 230-day job interview, that's what campaigning is really all about. We would have a Department of Environmental Management, Department of Health, and the Department of Natural Resources who would collaborate and cooperate to make all of those issues better for our state, because it really takes those three agencies working together in order to minimize risk to Hoosier health. And that's the main goal of government, to protect the citizens.
Absolutely.
That's why you have a government, to protect the citizens. And that's why I believe we can do such a much better job than we are doing today. And that's why I've put myself out there as a candidate to take that responsibility on.
One of the things when I heard the story about the plant, If I was a parent who smoked and I smoked a cigarette and I had a kid and I rolled the windows up and I smoked that cigarette, they would get me for abuse because that's exactly what that is.
Yes.
We know what cigarette smoking does. We know the harm that it causes. And this is my opinion. You don't have to, chime in on that. But to me, when you knowingly expose Hoosiers to carcinogens that are, awful, to me that's abuse. That's abuse of our citizens.
Clearly, there are many challenges that we have to our health. Air pollution is one of them, but you've mentioned tobacco smoking. Unfortunately, about 22% of Hoosier adults still smoke, and extremely unfortunately, many of them are women who happen to be pregnant, and that's one of the reasons why
pregnant women are smoking.
Our maternal mortality and our infant mortality rates are high. It's not the only reason. Accessibility of great prenatal care, the ability to get the vitamins you need, and all of those are components. But the smoking rate contributes to our infant and our maternal mortality problem. So pollution, whether it's man-made in terms of coal-fired plant smoke or whether it's man-made in terms of tobacco smoke, neither are good for Hoosier lungs.
And you know what? One of the things that I think we as Democrats get a bad rap for is that there's a suggestion that we don't care about business. And I believe that is fundamentally incorrect because we recognize how amazing businesses can be to communities and to livelihoods and offering people amazing opportunities, especially the good actors. We talk about some of your economic plans because again, they think all we want to do is tax and spend. We know that that's not true. Democrats are the only people that actually balance budgets, right? Mayor Hawksett has been doing that right here in Indianapolis. We haven't had a Democrat in governor's mansion in some time. But at the White House level, Democrats are balancing the budget and bringing down the deficit. Sure. Talk about your economic plan.
Business is key to our success as a society. We are a capitalist society. Now, certainly there are issues and problems in some aspects of capitalism, but capitalism is here to stay in your and my lifetimes, and we need to make sure that we do the best we can with it, which is one of the reasons I chose to, in addition to going to medical school, to get trained in business, and I got my MBA as a result, and I've been involved in both large and small businesses my entire life. I have worked for businesses as large as the Ford Motor Company. You don't get much larger than that. I was their director of healthcare management for a number of years, and I saw what great businesses can do, both in terms of creating great products, but also in employment. I had the privilege of working with United Auto Workers during that time, and they had one of the best healthcare, still do, one of the best healthcare benefits of any unionized workforce in the world. It's clear to me that businesses are certainly an asset to us here in the state of Indiana. We need to do more to attract them. I've said in many of the speeches that I've given, the first call I will make as governor is to the CEO, Mary Barra of General Motors. General Motors today has 6,800 jobs, direct jobs in Indiana. My question to her will be, what will it take to get to 7,800 in the next few years, and how can we be helpful in your doing that? So I just know that both large and small business are vitally important, and we've got to train our kids in order to be better prepared for business, because one of the challenges that GM has is that they have jobs that can't get filled because we don't have enough talented kids in our workforce. Mm-hmm. I say kids, I mean 20-year-olds. I use that term a little bit more today than I used to.
We just a little bit more seasoned. That's all, Doc. We just a little bit more seasoned.
But I just know that we can do a better job in getting our workforce prepared for companies like General Motors. It's not like the old days when I graduated from Shortridge High School. You could go down to the Shadeland Avenue Ford plant. You could go to the Chrysler plant near downtown. You could go to General Motors, and you could almost always get a job because there were the jobs that required more of a strong back and a strong arm than they did anything else. Now you have to have a knowledge of technology. You have to be able to manage the robots that run the factories today. It's not like the old days.
Right.
And that's where we're lagging. Although we've made some improvements, we can do much, much better in getting our workforce prepared. And in addition to that, we are challenged by some of our young people who don't see the importance of being drug free. You cannot have a safety sensitive position in a factory and not be drug free because of the injuries that you can cause your fellow workers. Whenever I'm speaking to young people, I ask them the question, if I as a surgeon got high or took drugs before I went into the operating room for operating on someone you cared about, would that make any sense? And of course, no one says yes to that. Everyone says no. Well, why is it that in the other safety sensitive roles do we not want the same thing? So we've got to not only enforce the regulations with respect to our drug issue in the state. It's got many different components, including the inappropriate use of opioids, which has been a huge issue in the state of Indiana. But we've also have to better prepare our workforce. And that all ties back, I think, Dana, to the problem that we're here primarily to discuss today, and that's the incredible situation that we have with this coronavirus pandemic, because it's exposing all of the other areas that we need to work on as well. And so I think we should use this experience of dealing with this unprecedented challenge that we have surrounding us today to fix not just the infrastructure related directly, but indirectly as well to the coronavirus epidemic.
I think you have laid out an incredible platform as to why you're running for governor. I think has outlined, the issues with the virus, and I think he's also outlined his stances on a lot of different issues. I would like to go ahead and start taking some questions from some of our online folk. Aaron, unfortunately, my technology is not working like I needed to get some of those questions. Can you? We're good. Town halls happen. Like, this is the first time we've done this. We're gonna make it work. Yeah. See, we got a team. We got a staff.
I'll start right there.
All right. Excellent. So we did that one. Okay. So this question comes from Ms. Jones, and it says she's concerned that adult day centers are not closing. We're getting phone calls advising us to continue to send our senior loved ones to these centers, that they have taken precautions to keep clients safe, when in fact it was issued that groups should not gather. Gosh, we kind of touched on that already. Let's reiterate. I mean, we understand the importance of the other side of being alone, and it's so important for our seniors to have some human contact. But let's talk about why it's also important at this point, especially our seniors, to maybe make a little phone call more.
Well, this is one of the trickier areas, because remember when I talked about a moment ago, spaces where individuals are either confined and there can't be free movement. And remember when we've heard on television of the fact that we don't want everyone to self-isolate, because we have to keep the infrastructure going. For instance, with respect to grocery stores and supply and so on. Well, the people that are protecting us, the fire departments, the police department, other first responders, the people that are caring for us in the hospitals, the people that are managing the groceries, all of them have loved ones that need to be either cared for as seniors or children. So we have to keep some aspects of adult care and child care open and available. And that's why I think it's best to look at it on a case-by-case basis, and to make sure that we have enough testing easily available, such that if there is a concern in a particular location, we can assess it very quickly and take the appropriate action.
Okay. Dr. Myers, 1 out of 3 Hoosiers do not have paid sick leave. With the isolation and needing to stay home, this could cripple our economy. What are some ideas that you have to remedy
Yet
this?
another reason to call a special session of the legislature. It's one of the tenets that I've put in my plan. We have a full plan of what we would do with respect to this coronavirus pandemic, and my hope is that it gets on our website as quickly as possible. But I believe that it's time for our legislature to really put something in place rapidly. Now, one would say, well, isn't the federal government looking at how it's going to be involved in that? Yes, they are looking at it, but we don't know when that'll happen, how it will happen, and we need to work on a parallel track in Indiana, such that if it does happen and we can merge our plans together, great. But if it doesn't, then we've taken care of our folks. And paid sick leave enhancements, improvements, making it available throughout the state is absolutely required.
Now, one of the pushbacks that we've been hearing from paid sick leave is that this could cause harm to some of our small businesses who are not necessarily receiving the revenue in.
Sure.
Talk to those folks, those small business owners, about your idea on how we're not trying to cripple you either, but we still have to do things.
Well, that's why there needs to be a supplemental approach from the federal government and the state government. We have to help those businesses. We don't want them to go under. We want them to continue to be generators of jobs and generators of wealth in our economy. But this is a rough patch, and that's what government is here for, to help us get over these rough patches as longer-term solutions come into play. We know that the economy is going to improve down the road.
Sure.
If we continue to evolve with respect to technology and continue creating the inventions that are allowing our societies to move forward, continuing to offer products that people want, that will bring our economy back. But in this rough patch, folks are going to need help. That's what government is for,
Absolutely.
to help people when they need help. And if not this public health emergency, when?
When, right. You would think that it would all click in. What advice do you have for those Hoosiers living in a county where there is no access to medical care?
Well, that's yet again we've exposed one of the structural weaknesses that we have in our state. I believe that it is now time to rethink our investment, our lack of investment in our public health infrastructure in Indiana. Indiana is, I think, either 48th or 49th in the nation in terms of how much we invest on a per capita basis with respect to our public health infrastructure. And that means that our local health departments have been starved. They've been underfunded for decades. When I was health commissioner, they were underfunded, and I don't think it's improved substantially at all, except in just a few areas. I know that it is time for us to rethink our thinking about local health departments, what role they should play, and how they might work better together. So I would hope that we could get the creative minds from those local health departments, the creative minds in the legislature, House and Senate committees that deal with healthcare, working collaboratively in order to find solutions and to stage them and put them in place. And I look back, Dana, to the day when I was a health commissioner, and it just seemed like there was a much better collaborative spirit. It seemed to me, and maybe I was being naive, that once the election was over, the Democrats put their D in the left pocket and the Republicans put their R in their right pocket, and we worked better together to get solutions. And that's what I would want to do as governor. I would want us to have the parties working collaboratively to figure out what the steps are that make the most sense given the problems that we have, and prioritize those problems and work to create solutions. So in direct answer, I believe that it's time to reinvest and invest, depending on your county, in the public health infrastructure to make care more easily available, and to use some of the new technologies that are available today as well. Not every visit can be a virtual visit, a telehealth visit.
Right.
But there are a lot that today they could be. And we have devices that are terrific today. We have blood pressure cuffs that you can use at home that'll transmit the information accurately. We have all other kinds of other devices as well that will allow physicians and nurses the ability to see how well you're doing without you necessarily having to drive in to be seen. Not in all cases, but in many. Let's take those cases off of the appointment lists for physicians and for hospitals, and let's save those spaces for the folks that absolutely have to be there.
Okay. This is more of a good medical technical question. Will warm weather stop the outbreak of the COVID-19?
We hope so, but we don't know. We know that there's a seasonal component to the influenza virus. What we don't know is whether that seasonal component is also going to be available for us with respect to the coronavirus pandemic. Certainly, everybody is hoping and praying that it does. That we are as a result of the seasons changing, going to have less transmission. That perhaps the virulence will change. We don't know that that's going to happen. We have to hope for the best, but plan for the worst. And that's one of the reasons why we certainly don't want to say that this is going to be over at a date certain. Folks are saying, well, it'll all get back to normal in May or June. People are making those dates up. We don't know that.
We don't know.
We don't know that. We hope it is, but we don't know that it will be.
And I think what people are not realizing, I'm almost a half a century. I've never been involved, never seen, never lived through in almost a half a century a pandemic.
Nor have I.
And so I don't know if people really understand the significance that this is a pandemic.
The two things that make this different from the 1918-19 Spanish flu, which is probably the closest thing that we could look at in the last 100 years that approaches this. The two things that make this different are, one, this virus seems to transmit more easily. We don't know why. We don't know exactly how, but we think it does. And number two, we believe that compared to today's flu, the mortality rate is higher. We don't understand all of the mechanisms why it is higher.